It was a Monday like any other in the city of Elmridge. Sunlight painted golden streaks through tall trees that lined the streets, and commuters buzzed through the morning haze in a half-dream state. But for Ariel Jackson, a 23-year-old recent college graduate, this morning felt a little more special. She had just landed a job at a local nonprofit focused on inner-city youth development, something close to her heart, given her own upbringing in a single-parent home in South Elmridge. Ariel, beautiful in a soft and effortless way, had a warm confidence about her. Her deep brown eyes sparkled when she smiled, and her natural curls bounced with each step she took in her modest heels as she walked down Maple Avenue toward her bus stop. She held her portfolio in one hand and her coffee in the other, going over in her mind the talking points for the meeting she had scheduled with her new team. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She glanced at the screen. It was a message from her mom. "Proud of you, baby. Knock him dead today. Love you always." Ariel smiled. Her mom always knew just what to say. She texted back a quick heart emoji just as the bus rounded the corner. Officer Danvers. On the other side of town, Officer Brad Danvers, 38, was starting his shift. Tall, broad, and with a permanent scowl etched into his face, Danvers had been with the Elmridge Police Department for over a decade. But his record was spotty. His superiors turned a blind eye to the increasing number of complaints filed against him. Unlawful stops, racial profiling, use of excessive force. To many in the community, he was a bully with a badge. To the department, however, he was just a bit aggressive but effective. Danvers tossed his coffee cup into the back seat of his patrol car and cruised through West Elmridge, a predominantly black neighborhood. He called it his watch zone, but the residents saw it differently. His mere presence made mothers clutch their children closer and teens cross to the other side of the street. He saw Ariel as she crossed the intersection near the bus depot. His eyes narrowed. She was well-dressed, polished, but he didn't see that. All he saw was a young black woman walking briskly through a part of town he assumed she didn't belong in. The stop. Ariel's heart skipped when the police cruiser slowed beside her. She kept walking, hoping it would pass. But it didn't. Instead, it rolled to a stop. The window slid down. "Hey," Danvers barked. "You stop right there." Ariel turned slowly, startled. "Is there a problem, officer?" "What's your name? Where are you headed?" "I'm on my way to work," she replied calmly. "Is something wrong?" "You match the description of someone we're looking for," he lied. Ariel's eyes widened. "I haven't done anything. I just caught the bus from my neighborhood." Danvers stepped out of the car. "Don't move." She reached into her bag to pull out her ID, explaining, "I have my driver's license and employee badge right here." "Put the bag down now," he shouted, pulling out his taser. Terrified, Ariel froze. What happened next would replay in countless news clips, security camera footage, and courtroom arguments. Danvers rushed toward her, grabbed her by the arm, slammed her against a patrol car, and wrenched her wrist behind her back. The force broke her arm. Her head hit the car door. She screamed in agony. A bystander filmed it all. Aftermath. By the time paramedics arrived, Ariel was barely conscious. Blood trickled from her temple, and her arm hung unnaturally. She was taken to St. Agnes Hospital, where doctors diagnosed her with a concussion, a fractured ulna, and internal bruising. Her mother arrived moments later, falling to her knees beside her daughter's bed. "What happened to my baby?" she cried, shaking with rage and grief. Meanwhile, the video taken by the bystander had already gone viral. The footage, undeniable in its brutality, spread like wildfire. People were outraged. Protests erupted in front of the Elmridge Police Department. Danvers was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, but many feared he would walk away with nothing more than a slap on the wrist. The media storm. Ariel woke to cameras flashing outside her hospital window. News anchors debated whether it was a case of mistaken identity or something far worse. Civil rights groups released statements condemning the department. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Ariel and hashtag End Police Brutality trended worldwide. She couldn't move her arm, couldn't sleep, and couldn't stop crying. The trauma was deeper than the bruises. She was shattered. "I keep replaying it," she whispered to her mother one night. "The way he looked at me, like I didn't matter." "You do matter," Her mother said, tears falling. You matter more than they'll ever admit. Broken pieces. Recovery was slow, not just for Ariel's body, but for her spirit. Each day she stared at her bandaged arm, the cast heavy and cold against her skin, wondering if she'd ever feel whole again. The doctors told her she might regain full use, but might wasn't comforting. Worse still was the mental toll. The nightmares began 2 weeks after the incident. Vivid flashbacks of flashing lights, yelling, pain. In every dream, her feet were glued to the ground, and no one came to help. Her therapist, Dr. Reina Lopez, sat across from her during a session one rainy Thursday. Trauma, she explained gently, isn't always something you recover from. Sometimes, you learn to live alongside it. But Ariel, you're allowed to feel angry. What happened to you wasn't your fault. Ariel just stared out the window. He didn't even ask me if I was okay. The cop behind the badge. While the world burned with outrage, Officer Brad Danvers hid behind the protective shield of his department. His union lawyer advised silence. No statements. No apologies. They'll spin anything you say. But Danvers was bitter. He didn't understand the fuss. In his eyes, he'd done his job. He hadn't meant to break her arm. It just happened. She didn't follow his instructions fast enough. That's what he told Internal Affairs, anyway. At home, he scrolled through the news articles and comment sections, jaw clenched. They're making this girl into some kind of saint, he muttered to himself. What about what I go through? What about how dangerous this job is? But somewhere, deep down, there was a flicker of something. Shame? Regret? Maybe. He buried it. Strength in silence. Weeks passed. Ariel stopped checking her notifications. Every headline only reminded her of her pain. But something unexpected happened during a physical therapy appointment. A nurse recognized her. You're her, aren't you? Ariel Jackson, she whispered. Ariel nodded, guarded. You're brave. My daughter saw your story. She's 14 and wants to start a self-defense class now. Because of you. Ariel didn't know what to say. She smiled weakly, blinking back tears. Later that night, she sat down at her laptop. For the first time since the incident, she began to write. Not to explain herself, but to express her truth. The words poured out. The fear, the pain, the injustice. Then the strength. And finally, the anger that she was no longer afraid to own. Courtroom reckoning. The trial began 2 months later. Danvers had been charged with assault and misconduct. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, protesters, family members. Ariel sat at the front, her mother holding her hand. When she took the stand, the room fell silent. I was just trying to go to work, she said, her voice shaking but clear. He didn't see a person. He saw a threat. He never even asked my name. Danvers sat motionless across the room, jaw tight. Her lawyer presented the bystander footage. The jury watched in horror. The prosecution rested their case with one powerful statement. If she had been white, would we be here? Danvers' lawyer argued excessive stress, miscommunication, split-second decisions. But no one in that courtroom could forget the look on Ariel's face in that video. The terror, the betrayal. More than a verdict. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On the 3rd morning, the verdict came in, guilty on both counts. Danvers showed no emotion as he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Outside, a crowd erupted into cheers. Reporters swarmed. Microphones raised, flashes popping like fireworks. Ariel didn't celebrate. She just held her mother's hand and whispered, "Let's go home." Later that evening, as she sat in her bedroom looking out at the stars, she reflected on everything she had lost, but also what she had gained. Courage, purpose, a voice. She logged back into her computer and finished the essay she had started weeks earlier. This time, she hit publish. It was titled, "What They Try to Break, I Rebuilt Stronger, Healing Beyond the Courtroom." In the weeks following the verdict, Ariel tried to find peace. The noise from the protests, the media circus, and the constant reminders of the past began to quiet, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. She spent most of her time at home, still recovering from the trauma, both of the attack and the trial. The physical therapy for her arm was grueling, but it was the emotional therapy that was the hardest. Ariel had always prided herself on being strong. But she had learned that strength didn't mean having to do everything alone. Her mom, though supportive, still had her moments of worry. One evening, after Ariel had spent hours on the phone with her attorney and advisors, her mother finally spoke up. "Ariel, you don't have to carry this weight alone. You've already done more than anyone could ever ask. But you deserve a life beyond the headlines." Ariel didn't answer right away. She just stared out the window at the peaceful streets of Elmridge, where everything had been so normal just a few months ago. But nothing felt normal anymore. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A message from Dr. Lopez, her therapist, read, "Ariel, I know it's been hard, but I think it's time we focus on what healing truly looks like for you. You've been strong for so long, but you deserve to take the time to grieve. We'll work through this together." Shattered identity. Ariel had always believed that strength came from pushing forward, no matter what. But as she sat with Dr. Lopez in their sessions, she began to understand that healing didn't mean just moving on. It meant reclaiming parts of herself she had lost in the process. Sometimes, Dr. Lopez said, we get so caught up in being strong for everyone else that we forget to take care of ourselves. Your strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about acknowledging your pain and giving yourself permission to heal. It took Ariel a few weeks to understand this, but she started the process of reconnecting with parts of herself she had hidden: her love for painting, her desire to write, her need for quiet. In between physical therapy sessions, she would retreat to the small studio in her apartment, her old easel set up by the window where the light streamed in. There, she began to paint again. Her brushstrokes were hesitant at first, as though the canvas itself was a mirror of her fractured emotions. But over time, the colors flowed more freely. She painted pieces that reflected her pain, her resilience, and ultimately, her path toward healing. The power of advocacy. Ariel's story, though painful, had become a symbol of resilience. After the trial, the media and activist groups began to shift their focus from just the injustice she'd faced to the larger systemic issues that needed change. Ariel had always known the world could be better, but now she realized that she could be part of making it better. She began working with civil rights organizations, sharing her story at rallies, universities, and in town halls. What started as a way for her to heal became a platform for activism. Every speech she gave, every march she participated in, gave her a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a victim of police brutality anymore. She was a voice for change. One afternoon, she was invited to speak at a large rally in downtown Elmridge. As she stood at the podium, her heart raced. The crowd was large, much larger than she had expected, with people of all ages, races, and backgrounds. They were there because they believed in justice. They were there because they believed in what Ariel had become, a catalyst for change. She spoke about what had happened to her, but more importantly, she spoke about the power of community. She talked about how the healing process wasn't just about her recovery, but about all of them, how the fight against injustice was a collective effort. She urged them not to stand idly by, but to act, to demand accountability, to ensure that no one else would have to experience the kind of trauma she had. Her words were met with cheers, claps, and shouts of agreement. She left that day with a renewed sense of purpose. The reckoning of Brad Danvers. Despite the public outcry and the guilty verdict, the fallout for Brad Danvers had only just begun. His conviction had been a significant blow to his career, but what no one had expected was that the investigation would uncover a pattern of misconduct that spanned years. Multiple victims, multiple complaints, all ignored by his superiors. For the first time in his life, Danvers was truly forced to confront the consequences of his actions. The courts had found him guilty, but the department had turned its back on him. His colleagues no longer spoke to him, and the support that once followed him had vanished. He sat alone in his small apartment one evening, watching the news coverage of the protests and the speeches Ariel had given. His jaw tightened. The overwhelming weight of guilt began to settle over him. He hadn't wanted any of this to happen. He had always convinced himself he was just doing his job. But now, with everything exposed, he could no longer hide behind the badge. In the months that followed, Danvers faced further legal battles, public disdain and isolation. The media painted him as a symbol of everything wrong with law enforcement in Elmridge. A new beginning. Ariel had been through the fire, and she had emerged stronger. But her path wasn't linear. It was filled with setbacks, moments of doubt, and days when it felt like she was walking alone. But each time she fell, she got back up. She continued her advocacy work, expanding her reach beyond Elmridge. She was invited to speak on national platforms and eventually became a leading voice in movements for police reform and racial justice. But more importantly, she had found peace within herself. One evening, as she walked through a park near her home, a young woman approached her. She was holding a piece of paper with Ariel's name written on it. I wanted to thank you," the woman said nervously. You helped me find my voice. I've been afraid of speaking out for so long, but after hearing your story, I feel like I can. So, thank you." Ariel smiled softly, realizing that this was what healing was truly about. It wasn't just her own recovery. It was about empowering others to rise as well. As she stood there, watching the young woman walk away, Ariel knew that her journey was far from over. There was still work to be done, still injustice to be fought, but now she was no longer broken. She was whole, and she would continue to rise no matter what. The weight of leadership. Ariel's newfound platform became both a source of strength and a burden. The public looked to her as a symbol of justice, but behind closed doors, the pressure was overwhelming. She found herself constantly juggling interviews, speeches, and calls for comment. The expectations seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. It wasn't just about police reform anymore. It was about change on a broader scale. She was asked to sit on advisory boards, meet with political leaders, and lend her voice to countless causes. It was gratifying, but Ariel soon realized that her own healing had taken a back seat. One afternoon, as she prepared for a major interview, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mom. "Ariel, please don't forget to take care of yourself. I can see you're burning out. It's okay to step back sometimes." Ariel paused, reading the message over and over. She had always prided herself on her resilience, but her mother was right. She needed to reclaim a part of herself that wasn't defined by trauma or activism. For the first time in months, Ariel allowed herself to cancel a meeting. She spent the afternoon in her apartment, listening to music, making a cup of tea, and reading one of the novels she had left on her bookshelf. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Breaking the silence. Despite her moments of retreat, Ariel's voice continued to reverberate across the country. She was invited to a televised roundtable discussion on police reform, a gathering of prominent activists, politicians, and victims of police violence. The tension was palpable as each speaker debated the most effective solutions. When Ariel took the stage, her calm demeanor contrasted with the fiery passion of others. But when it was her turn to speak, the room fell silent. She shared her story once again, but this time, something had changed. She wasn't just recounting her pain. She was framing it as a call to action, a plea for those in power to understand the lived experiences of people like her. She spoke about the ways in which the system could evolve, how empathy and accountability were crucial to true reform. "We can't just be angry. We need to be strategic," she said, her voice unwavering. "We have to demand changes, not just from the people who harm us, but from ourselves. We need to be part of the solution." Her words struck a chord with many in the room. And for the first time, Ariel realized that her activism was not just about seeking justice for herself. It was about changing the system for generations to come, reclaiming her power. As the months passed, Ariel's advocacy continued to expand. She traveled to different cities, meeting with activists, lawmakers, and individuals whose lives had been affected by systemic racism. Yet, no matter how much she achieved, the process of healing remained ongoing. She sought out new opportunities for personal growth. She took art classes to refine her painting, started volunteering at a local youth center to mentor young people, and began writing her memoir, an intimate reflection on her journey from trauma to activism. One evening, while working on a new painting, Ariel paused, realizing how far she had come. The canvas before her was a depiction of a broken tree, its branches twisted and bent, but with new shoots of green sprouting from the roots. It was a symbol of everything she had gone through and everything she had become. For the first time in a long time, she saw herself as more than just a survivor. She was a fighter, an advocate, a creator. The return of Danvers. Brad Danvers had not disappeared from the public eye entirely. Despite his conviction and subsequent media fallout, his case remained in the spotlight. His appeal for a reduced sentence was scheduled, and his legal team was prepared to challenge the ruling. The public continued to debate whether his punishment was too harsh or justified. Ariel knew that his appeal wasn't just about him. It was about the system. It was a test of whether the justice he had received would hold up, or if the system would once again show favoritism to one of its own. One night, after a long day of meetings and writing, Ariel watched the news broadcast on Danvers' appeal. His lawyer argued that the punishment did not fit the crime and that he had shown remorse. Ariel's hand tightened around her mug. She felt the familiar anger flare inside her. This isn't just about him, she muttered to herself. It's about what this case represents. She picked up her phone and texted her attorney. We need to be prepared. This isn't over. A new era of justice. The day of Danvers' appeal was tense, with both sides presenting their arguments in a court that felt more like a battleground. For Ariel, it wasn't just about seeing him punished. It was about ensuring that this case would be a stepping stone toward lasting change. The defense tried to paint him as a man who had learned from his mistakes, but Ariel's team fought back fiercely. They presented evidence of Danvers' long history of complaints, his aggressive approach to policing, and the psychological toll it had taken on people like Ariel. As the judge read his decision, there was an eerie stillness in the room. The appeal was denied. Danvers would serve his sentence as originally imposed. Ariel exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It wasn't a complete victory. It was a step in the right direction. But it was something. The future of change. In the years that followed, Ariel's advocacy work continued to gain momentum. She expanded her efforts globally, partnering with international organizations to tackle racial injustice on a global scale. The movement she had helped inspire became a force to be reckoned with. She had found balance between her activism and personal life. She learned that while her work was important, it didn't define who she was. She was more than just her trauma. She was a mother, a mentor, an artist, and a friend. As she stood before a crowd of young activists at a conference years later, Ariel spoke of the challenges and victories along the way. Remember, she said, her voice filled with quiet strength, change doesn't come overnight. It comes with each of us, deciding that we won't settle for the world as it is. We will fight for the world as it should be. The crowd erupted into applause. Ariel smiled softly, knowing that her journey, though hard, had only just begun. Legacy of change. Years had passed since the trial, since the verdict, and since the last time Ariel stood in front of a microphone, recounting the story that had changed her life. Now, she was a woman who had seen both the darkness of human cruelty and the light of change that followed. She sat in a conference room, overlooking the city of Elmridge, where it all began. The room was filled with young activists, lawyers, and community leaders who had gathered to discuss the future of police reform. Ariel was there not just as a survivor, but as someone who had shaped the future, someone who had turned pain into purpose. The walls were lined with photographs of rallies, protests, and the faces of those who had joined her cause over the years. A plaque on the wall bore her name, Ariel Miller Justice Foundation, an organization that had helped push for legislative changes across the country, advocating for accountability in law enforcement, better training for officers, and policies that prioritize community safety over aggressive policing. But it wasn't just about laws or policies anymore. It was about hearts and minds. Ariel had worked with schools, communities, and local governments to create spaces for honest conversations about race, justice, and healing. She had helped pave the way for programs that provided resources for victims of police brutality and mental health support for both officers and citizens. As she stood at the front of the room, listening to the young voices debating strategies, Ariel felt a sense of peace. She wasn't just a symbol anymore. She was a part of a larger movement, a movement that would outlast her. The room, quieted as one of the leaders of a new initiative, a young woman named Maya, stood up to speak. Ariel, we wouldn't be here without you, Maya said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Your story, your work, everything you've done has paved the way for us to continue the fight. We carry your legacy forward. Ariel smiled, her heart full. No, she replied, her voice calm but resolute. The legacy is ours. All of us. And it's not over. We're just getting started. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything felt as it should be, like the weight of the world had shifted, even if just a little. A new dawn. Ariel walked through the city one last time before leaving Elmridge for a new chapter in her life. The streets had changed since that fateful day. New murals adorned the sides of buildings, and the sound of laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the anger and frustration that had once hung heavy. She paused in front of a mural that depicted a tree with branches stretching toward the sky, each leaf a different shade of color, symbolizing unity and diversity. Beneath the mural, the words were simple, yet powerful. Justice begins with us. Ariel touched the cool surface of a wall, feeling the weight of those words. She had helped to plant the seeds of change, but it was up to the next generation to nurture them. As she turned and walked away, a young woman approached her, a familiar face, one she had met years ago at a rally. She was carrying a clipboard, organizing a petition for further reform. Ariel, the young woman said with a smile, I wanted to thank you again. For everything. For giving me the courage to speak out. Ariel smiled back, her heart swelling with pride. You're doing the work now, she replied. Keep going. The young woman nodded, eyes filled with determination. We will. And as Ariel walked toward the horizon, leaving Elmridge behind, she knew that the work would never be truly finished. The fight for justice was ongoing, and she had helped ignite something that couldn't be extinguished, something that would continue to burn brightly for generations to come. In the distance, the sun began to set, casting its warm glow over the city. It was the dawn of a new day. The end.